So there's a big shift. There's a big shift calling to happen in the world. And I'm guessing you're here because something about that resonates for you. We see this shift as something about expecting more from leaders and expecting less. Leaders used to be expected to have all the answers. Now, in a way, leaders are expected to hold the right space and ask the right questions. Leaders would kind of drive a particular direction, but everybody knows there's no complete solution. So it's a lot about creating a diversity of creative new ideas rather than driving things too narrowly. And employees expect to be engaged and involved and consulted. And so there's this big shift that's wanting to happen. And yet, I don't see it happening that fast. And what I make up is it's not happening that fast because people don't quite know how to do it. We kind of talk about including everyone, and we talk about diversity being a wonderful thing, and we talk about having the hard conversations and conflict being a good thing. But what does that really mean when there is conflict and when there is kind of petrol on the fire? Do leaders and followers, for that matter, have much skill in how to handle that? I'm not so sure, and I think that part of the reason we're bringing ORSC into the conversation is that I think it provides some of the useful skills.
Well, thank you. And the particular dimension that the invite was all about was the big shift from being a leader of self to being a leader of others. And this is an invitation to explore that further in this webinar, to how do we navigate that path, be it I see what appeared to me to be experienced leaders, but then how do you support your own subordinates in leading their own teams? And if you are a new leader yourself, how are you navigating that path, and what are the challenges that you're experiencing in your leadership role? So this is really an invitation to engage and explore that further, and perhaps you'll gain insights, and that's what we're hoping for, that you'll gain insights from this call that you can take over to your workplace.
We're really happy to have a real range of people here on the call tonight, and aware that some of you are new leaders yourselves, and some of you are leaders of leaders, organizational leaders, and some of you are also in the field of coaching and organization development and so on. So we welcome all your voices, and in just a moment we're going to start bringing those in, but I guess first we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah. I guess I can start. My name is Refilo Mokonyane, and in terms of my role in this call is I'll be co-leading the webinar with Mish. I do, or rather I did ORSC, which is, for those who don't know, it stands for Organization and Relationship Systems Coaching. So I'm a ORSC practitioner myself. So in terms of history, before going on to that path, I studied information systems and worked in corporate as a project manager within the IT space. And I've been in the journey and transitioned to a career, and this is what led me to this space now. And I've been in the coaching field, or what I refer to as the human development field rather, for the nearly 3 years. And so it's a career that I'm passionate about, and really don't regret the transition. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you all.
Thank you. And I also just want to appreciate your role as a leader in the ORSC community of about 600 people in South Africa, or in the whole of Africa. Building community in the complicated way that happens nowadays. So just appreciating you for that as well. And for myself, I kind of wear two hats on this call. I'm also a systems coach and earn my living really as a coach, and working with large systems and large organizations that are wanting to change the way they operate to really meet the needs of the 21st century, both in South Africa and globally, doing quite a lot of work in Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, etc. And I also come from the field of entrepreneurial leadership. I started a company back in the 90s and was the CEO for about 15 years. So I sort of speak with the hat of the entrepreneur who wants to get things done and the coach who wants to kind of hold space for things to happen. And I'm really grateful to be here with you. We looked at this and said, this is a bit like, our situation is a bit like a leader of a new team, a team that's just convened. And you never know where to start. How do you get to know everybody in a new team, or if you've just been promoted? And if you kind of go around one by one, it gets a bit slow. So we're going to do something different and invite you to please take part fully. We're going to have a kind of cocktail party without the booze. I'm really sorry we can't email you a drink because it's the right time of day. But we're going to ask you to virtually speaking, walk up to someone who you probably don't know and have a very direct conversation. You know, you're protected by the internet in some way. Think of it as a coat that leaves you safe and free to say what you want to say. But the invitation is, when we invite you into a breakaway room, click on the blue button that says join, wait till a person appears in front of you on your screen, and then greet them, introduce yourself, and dive straight into like a 1-minute conversation about what is it about leadership that is most difficult for you personally. Just pick one gem from your leadership experience in any aspect of life and just crisply share it with your colleague. You'll have about 2 minutes for that whole conversation, and we'll bring you back, and then you'll cross the room and meet someone else. So I trust that you're good with that, and please shout now if you're concerned. Otherwise, I'm about to create what Zoom calls breakout rooms. There should be 2 people in each room.
See you all on the other side.
See you all on the other side. Welcome back, everybody. How was that?
It was cool.
Yeah, it was great.
What struck you about talking to a stranger about leadership? What struck you?
Anastasia, do you want to go?
Sure, thanks. So I think for me, you know, as I mentioned to the 2 leaders that I spoke to previously, what you mentioned, I'm a new leader. You know, I've only recently been promoted into a leadership management role. And I think what was really interesting for me, you know, engaging with the two other gentlemen, was that, you know, there's the challenges that I'm facing on the daily is like I'm not alone, which is really great to hear.
Yay! That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Anybody else? Either what you noticed for yourself or what you feel is different in this virtual space after that experience.
So Michelle, it's Gary here. How are you?
Hi Gary, welcome.
I learned something really important. I mean, you know where you know me from. So I do a lot. I'm doing a tremendous amount of leadership work in my hobby, which is MKP. But in my business, I found myself too busy to lead. I'm too busy doing other stuff. So that was a really important breakthrough moment for me to go, okay, maybe I need to start to show up in my business the way I show up in my hobby.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you and welcome.
And anyone else who, no pressure, anyone else who would like to share?
Yeah, I can. I chatted with Anastasia and with you, but with Anastasia, what struck me immediately was the fact that leadership is no longer the preserve of older people, people with years and years and years of experience. And what was very exciting, and especially in the tone of her voice when she was interacting with me, she's really excited about what she's doing. And I found that so invigorating. That was really cool.
Thanks, Annie.
Beautiful.
And yeah, thank you. And that's part of the reason that the two of us are co-leading this, because you see one of us has gray hair and the other one doesn't. So we're holding that spectrum as well. Was there another voice? Okay.
Looks like the book was destroyed.
Well, you wanted to speak, Deborah? You.
Yes, it's interesting. I was on the phone in the breakaway session with Klaus, and he started mentioning how in a way overwhelmed he was with the many tasks, and all of them had to be done as from yesterday. So I resonate with that. I'm also feeling the pressure. So yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. What we have more or less lined up for you in the remainder of the hour is I just want to summarize what we're looking forward to. The first thing to do is to just be clear what we're here for, and then how we're going to be together, and then really a kind of a panel discussion that's already starting now. So most of this is going to be a conversation around kind of the key challenges for new leaders, and a bit about what systems thinking and relationship systems intelligence and ORSC can offer to new leaders. So what we'd like to just, again, what we feel is the first thing for any new leader is not just to outline the task, which I've just done, but also to open up the question about the relationship. So I think Refilwe is going to take us through an online version of what we always do in leadership, which is to engage people around how you want to be together if you're going to make breakthroughs about leadership.
Yeah, and it's not so much of doing ground rules as we usually do, and because in many times my experiences, ground rules are do not do this, do this. You know, it's very command oriented. But then this, it's really looking into, as you build relationships with your team, what level of quality do you want in those relationships? And the invitation really is to think about what is that quality that you want to bring into this particular webinar in particular. And it's also like you could say a taster in a sense of this is what you could possibly do with your own team. So before jumping into tasks and deliverables, maintain the relationship first, or rather nurture the relationship first. So I'm going to share with you Mentimeter. So how it works is that I will need you to either, you can use your laptop and open a new window and go to menti.com. So I'll share with you my screen just so you can see the code. And what it does, what I'm asking you to do is think of qualities that you want to bring into this webinar, and how is it that you want to be together as a team in this particular space, and go for one word that will describe that particular quality. So you have an option of 3 fields to input, and then we'll see what's in the room in essence of what people are wanting. So if you can go either on your cell phone or on your browser, go to Menti, MENTI.com. And as you open up the page, it will ask you for a code. And the code to insert is this particular one that I'm hovering over, 922640. So I'm just, alert me if you are on menti.com or if you need clarification. Okay, so we've,
which one is it? Small piece.
okay.
What you're seeing is a pattern starting to appear of our voices. We're using this just because it's hard to hear all the voices in a big group online. And we're hoping, we've had 3 responses so far, we're hoping we'll get a few more. The software is not clever enough to see that playfulness and fun are more or less the same thing, but we as humans, we can figure that out.
Yes.
And anybody who doesn't have a, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just seeing curious and curiosity, which is the same thing. So we have that as a sense of quality that people are going for.
Anybody else who's still getting into menti.com?
Okay, I'll just submit it.
Okay, it seems to be growing. We're seeing playfulness, we're seeing curiosity, we're seeing challenge and connectedness, credibility and honest, a bit similar as well, truthful. We've had 5 responses, so maybe just while any last people are still adding, anything you're making of this? These are just some of our aspirations collectively. Anything that strikes you about that might guide us for the remainder of this session. For us, it's like, let's keep it light, let's keep it moving, let's be truthful. And I got the impression that you've already broached that very successfully in those initial conversations, just the way you reported back. I see sharing has now got bigger, which means several people have said that. So there's a focus on sharing here. And I guess the question I want to ask you is, having contributed to this pattern, which is not crystal clear to any of us, but there's some picture of roughly what we're going for tonight, are you willing to share responsibility for creating sharing, fun, truthfulness, and honesty, curiosity? You're willing to take some responsibility for doing that?
I think while we're talking how we want to be with each other, I think for a logistical support, can I ask that if you're not speaking, let's stay on mute just to cut out any background noise. So if you can kindly do that, so, and then we can proceed.
Great. And maybe raise your hands if you're up for if you say yes to my request to share responsibility for creating a sharing space, a fun space, a truthful space. You up for that?
Yep.
See hands raised. I know some of you haven't got video, so yes is also good. And some people are clicking the hand raise on the software. So fabulous, thank you. It's always a bit chaotic online, so we're not looking for perfection here, but we're looking for some sense, and we do this as leaders, as Refilwe said, some sense that the people have been consulted about the culture and atmosphere of this session, and that the people are sharing responsibility for creating it. They're not looking at the leaders as some sort of God on high or judge or fountain of wisdom. So to me, this helps to set the scene for collaborative leadership.
And yeah, thank you for your shares. And I think it just gives us a common ground in terms of where we are and what we wanting to uphold during the remainder of the time. And next is really the crux of the webinar. So we're inviting you to have a conversation around what we deemed to be the typical challenges that leaders face. So we may not cover everything that you raised in your own mingle shares, but I'm hoping that with this the themes that we chose between myself and Mish, it will at least help you to address some of the challenges that you might be having. So yeah, so I'm basically opening up the dialogue. I think this is an option where the muting will need to go in as and when you want to say your word. And yeah, let's have a discussion and share. And this is an invitation to share as well. Like it was alluded in the alliance that was just designed. So for starters, I'm looking through leadership. It's about achieving results through people. And the stance that we take as ORSC or from ORSC is that relationships precedes results. So here is a matter of looking into how do we become intentional as leaders to build those relationships and not so much deviate to being driven by results and tasks. So that's the theme in essence that I'm wanting to start off with. So we'll spend about 8 to 9 minutes or even 10 minutes and then switch over to the next theme. So the floor is open to you all.
What do you find in your leadership? How does this thing work about balancing task and relationship in your work as leaders?
Don't feel rushed. So Gary here. I think that the older and more mature I get, the more important the relationship becomes and the less important the task becomes. And sometimes the task is important. So it's finding that balance. It's always, especially in a work environment. In a work environment, the task is more important. In a personal relationship, the relationship is more important. And the relationship is always important. So the older I get, the more it's about the relationship, the less it's about the task. Well, the more mature I get, I guess. Better word.
I heard a nod from somebody. Would you like to add?
Yeah, Nish, I can relate to what Gary is saying. I just have something else to add, and that is that my experience in the field that I'm currently working in is that my relationship is also determined by the competence level of the follower that I'm working with, the team member that I'm working with. So if in a particular area, the competence level is lower than what I expected, my relationship may need adjusting. In other words, I might be required to be a little more directive in order to give guidance. If the competence level is what I expected, then I can be less directive and I can hold back more, which means that I can actually spend more time developing the relationship. At the end of the day, there is a task to perform and there are results to be achieved. That can't be sacrificed. That is my view. But the relationship is what is going to get me to achieving those results. So I have to make sure that I can calibrate, I can move in and out, I can breathe in this interaction that I have with the person that is looking to me for leadership. I'm going to stop there because then I'm going to start wondering.
Thank you. And thank you for that, because it's a piece of the designed alliance you just spoke to, that we kind of say our piece and then we make space for others. So I love the way you closed there, Henny. Thank you. Anybody who wants to pick up on that? There were some quite important points and some challenging points made. I'll just dip a piece in from my experience that, like I say, the CEO in me is so with you, Henny, about like, you can't give up the task. You've got to get stuff done. And the other piece that I just own for myself is that my competence level varies according to how I feel. So when I feel like the boss is treating me badly, I behave like an incompetent. That doesn't mean the boss is treating me badly, but if I don't form a good relationship with my boss, I often withhold my performance. I don't do it so logically as that. I just behave like an idiot. Don't know if anybody wants to pick up on this little conversation.
I'll pick on up at Miss Gary again. I had a staff member, or I have a staff member, and I got feedback via somebody else that he didn't want to ask for support when he needed it because he was scared that he was going to get criticized. And actually, I want him to ask for support when he needs it. So part of leadership is being accessible when it needs to be. So I relate exactly to what you were saying.
There was somebody else coming in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we say relationships precede results, I think, so what does it mean to be in good relationship in a working context? I think that's, Gary said it early on, because relationship is such a big word. And it's not always about being sweet and cuddly and endlessly empathetic. It also includes accountability and clear borders. And yeah, I mean, we mustn't forget that there's a contract between an employer and an employee. And contracts create actually clarity. It's how we manage that creates confusion. And so the relationship needs to be unpacked a little bit. What are we talking about?
And I'm just, as you're speaking, Klaus, I'm thinking with relationship to some people, it's like it's a no-go area. It's easier to go into task and, oh, did you do this? Did you not do this? Versus just pausing and seeing how the other is doing. Because even with employees that may be struggling, all they may need is to have some level of assurance or guidance to say you are in the right path. But then if that opportunity is missed, it leaves room for, I don't know, for not having, I guess maybe a doubt in essence to say, can I do this? Am I capable? So I'm interested to know if it's a common thing among the leaders we have in the space. Is it a struggle for yourself to even pause and just have connection with your subordinates?
Can I respond to that, Trafila? When I was a lot younger, in my 40s, I did find it a little difficult because I carried around the perception that I had to act in a certain way. When I became disabused of that notion, and I'm very, very grateful I was, it allowed me to develop an appropriate relationship with any one of my subordinates at any time. And just to pick up on the word competence that I used in my first contribution, my definition of competence is the combination of skills, knowledge, and attitude. And my role in developing a relationship is to assist, guide, facilitate that person in enhancing their skills, knowledge, and if their attitude needs adjustment, to be an example so that they can see where their attitude is not in alignment with my attitude.
Thank you. I mean, that feels so clear. And I appreciate a number of people, can't see whether all of them have got gray hair or not, but a number of people have spoken about what they've learned over time. And I'm very glad that we've also got new leaders on this call, because there's something that we can learn from each other. I also just want to kind of wrap on this particular dimension so that we can move on to another one, and just say what I think ORSC brings on this is a lot of focus of what we're doing right now, being conscious and intentional about building relationship. And as a couple of people have said, without giving up on accountability, without giving up on the outcomes that are needed, without giving up on the guidance that was spoken about, which also includes the non-tangible, like Henny mentioned, attitude. What I found particularly useful for me as a leader was also the focus on the whole system rather than the individuals. For me as a leader, when I was a CEO, I tended to sort of pounce on whoever was the problem. And now I look much more at the whole system and say, what's happening in this team and what does this team needs? And it feels a bit less painful and heavy going on me as a leader when I'm looking at holding and shaping the system meaning the container of the whole team, rather than trying to have one-on-one detailed kind of fixing things with each individual. So I do think that there's a lot to be gained by becoming proficient at working with the whole system, and that's quite a foundation of ORSC. I'm wondering, I want to welcome you, Paul. I see Paul's joined us, and we're in the middle, Paul, and you're completely welcome. And we're discussing different dimensions of leadership. And I think the one that's just sort of top of my mind right at this moment as we're talking is that what feels so pertinent in South Africa right now, and I think it's exactly the same everywhere in the world, is heightened conflict, more engagement with difference, and the clear call to leaders to respond positively to difference and to conflict, and to have the hard conversations in a skillful way. A number of you have already spoken in broad terms about how difficult it is to have the hard conversations. I think when you layer in the fact that we live in a very divided society, in a very divided world, and that anger is surfacing in more and more potent and scary ways, and that diversity is a key to our success, and yet diversity means we don't agree with each other. I just want to kind of ask that question about what you're noticing as leaders around dealing with difference, with disagreement, with conflict in the workplace.
Does the silence mean we're pondering?
My view around conflict in the workplace is that it gets either scooped underneath the carpet, or it goes to the smoking break, or it just gets discussed in the passages, but it doesn't get addressed intentionally and constructively, either when it emerges or at any other point. So there's some awkwardness around how to really grab the bull by the horns and work with it.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
I can ask a question.
Go ahead.
When you use the expression, and I know it's an expression, grab the bull by the horns, are you referring to a person that you seem to think is causing the conflict, or are you meaning something else?
I'm talking about conflict itself. Conflict.
Conflict.
Yeah, so actually dealing with it, sitting down and saying like, hey, what is this? What's going on? And, how do we,
But are you
ventilate?
dealing with the group, or are you dealing with an individual?
No, I'm dealing with conflict. So a little bit to Mish's point earlier on, when you take a systemic,
there we go.
You're looking at conflict as a presence rather than looking at who's doing what to whom.
There we go. Okay, I'm totally with you. That's perfect.
Cool bananas.
This is where we really, I think that the two of you are highlighting something that's so critical. And this is where at the introduction, I said, a big shift is called for, but we don't all know how to do it. I totally didn't know how to do what the two of you guys are talking about. I tended to pounce on, that one's a troublemaker, or that one is not pulling their weight, or whatever. When I got this aha moment of, in the system, some people are engaged and some are disengaged, and that there is conflict, there is heat in this team. There's something going on. To me, now I understand, it's a signal that something needs to shift. It's not a signal to come down like a ton of bricks on the person who voices it, because often they're just like the lightning conductor.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Mish, you're not alone. I certainly wasn't. I certainly didn't enter the corporate life having this font of wisdom. I stumbled and I battled and I hit brick walls and I messed up relationships until I also had my aha moment.
Thank you. Anybody else? We've had a couple of us gray hairs speaking. Anybody else, particularly from the newer leaders, who would like to bring something in on this?
I don't know. On my side is wanting to speak towards being bold to have these hard conversations, because it may well seem like it's easier to go with things when things are going well. But then when I'm challenged, even personally in my own leadership, there's a sense of, can I take a bold decision and be accountable to it, versus, oh, I need to check in with my senior, so to speak, before going ahead. So there's that whole level of what's in my power as a leader to stick it out and to really face, versus elevating the issue to somebody else.
What others? And welcome to Urvasi and Paul, who've joined while we've been talking. Anybody else who'd like to pick up on this? This, to me, and I'm particularly kind of, and I'm not forcing anyone to speak, but particularly pointing at the younger people, because my experience is that many young people are less willing to put up with nonsense and feel more strongly the pain of conflict, and also if they're don't feel like they're being heard. And I really heard you, Refilwe, about and there's a boldness about speaking up. So really inviting that voice.
It's Gary here, who's younger than you, Mish, but older than most of the others here. So, but I'll take the gap. I just have an observation, because I work with my wife, and we've been married for 25 years, and we've been working together for about 10. And there's a massive difference between being in relationship in a personal relationship and being in a work relationship, because in a work relationship there is a requirement to get things done. But working with my wife, I kind of have had to find that balance about being treated as the boss and treating her as a staff member, and she is my wife, and I need to maintain that relationship. And it's made it a very different way of leadership to get things done, but to also understand where things are happening. So it's made a difference to me in terms of the way I lead in that relationship, because it's not just about getting things done. There is more to it, and sometimes you have to be able to get things done. So it's just been interesting learning for me.
Yeah, that was very brave of you to share that. I value that. That's very good.
I think there's still time for us to move to another topic. So I just want to try summing up some of what I think ORSC brings. You know, this seminar is standalone, and there's going to be in November, 5th and 6th of November, there's going to be a 2-day course broadly addressing this stuff. And some of the things that I think ORSC gives that's in that course is like, so how do you hear all the voices, even the ones that you don't want to hear? And how do you work towards alignment without forcing people to agree? Because to me, this is a crucial bit for a leader to do, not to just enforce this is right and that's wrong, but to allow difference of opinion and yet alignment, as so many of you have said, to get the job done. And another area that we cover is the fact that when there is difficulty, what we call toxic communication emerges. People say and do things in ways that causes pain to others. This is just a fact of life. What we think ORSC is really fabulous at is giving names to that so-called toxic communication, making an explanation of why it gets like that, and then getting really skillful about the antidotes. To say, what are you really trying to do in this hard conversation, and how could you have it without losing the hardness, but losing some of the toxicity. And we find there's some fantastic tools there that you can use with your team the very next day to help shift the balance on that, so that the hard stuff is still discussed, but it's discussed in a less damaging way. And the differences and all the voices are still heard, again, without being damaged to the alignment of the team or the organization. So just, if you're interested, it's something to explore further after this call. That course is coming. But I'd like to just move to a different area, because one of our things is we're working with teams and systems and human systems, right? Relationship systems. They don't speak English or Zulu or Xhosa or Afrikaans. Teams and systems speak through the vibe, you could say, through the emotional field, through the energy in the room. And so I think a leader needs to learn that language of systems and create tools to allow the team to express itself. Otherwise, what we see, and you see it sort of at the highest level in organizations, we had all the top guys in Absa Capital walk out a few months ago, or maybe it's a year ago by now. We see people on the streets burning the place down because they don't feel their voices are being heard. So it's pertinent. My point is, what tools do you have or do you know of, or what questions and comments do you have about how to read what's going on in the team as a whole or the organization as a whole, as opposed to just listening to the English or the Zulu or the Afrikaans or the Xhosa?
So tempted to close the gap with the silence. With my gray hair, I won't.
Ravasi,
I don't think my speaker is working. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, is it? I'm trying to speak for the last 2 times.
Sorry.
So it's language. I suppose going beyond the verbal, what we can hear is also body language and gestures. Someone hinted that competency involves attitude, not just knowledge and experience and training, but also attitude. So you do pick it up when someone is feeling offish about you. I think that's what I'm trying to depend on now. My intuition, say, just reading someone's body language towards me.
Fabulous, thank you. Who else can contribute? We're so glad you did find your voice through the speakers.
Hi Mish, it's Paul. Can you hear me?
Welcome, Paul. Yes, you're online with a whole bunch of people.
Okay, thank you. I've only just figured out how to unmute myself. In a big organization, often one of the difficulties is just the sheer complexity of what has to be done and how many people are involved. And what to prioritize, where to start, so that something starts to happen. And I think sometimes we just get paralyzed by how much there is to do, and then nothing really gets started or becomes successful.
Thank you. I feel like what you're saying also resonates with the national dialogue as well. A bit of a national feeling of it's all just too difficult. Anybody would like to respond to that, particularly from this kind of systems perspective? What do you do with a system that is just feeling overwhelmed, actually?
Misha, are we not moving into the field of emotional intelligence, EQ?
I think we're moving there and beyond, and what are we really calling for, and this is now ORSC language, perhaps jargon, but we call it relationship systems intelligence. So what's the intelligence and the voice of the whole collective, where EQ is often more just me understanding you. This is me being tuned into the us, as Tebogo said, the gestures and the body language and the energy and the vibe of the team or the organization or the community or the country.
Yeah, well, I see EQ as first me understanding me in order for me to understand you.
Great. And the guy, Goldman, who wrote about that, does speak about that. He talks about knowing emotional and social intelligence, knowing self and knowing other.
Yes.
And what we try to do in this work is to build on that and really strengthen that, as you just pointed us, and take it one further to the sense of what is the wisdom and the voice and the purpose and the need of the collective. And that's quite hard to talk about like this right now, and we don't have time to demonstrate it, but we do it really well on the course. And you walk away with very practical methods for hearing that voice of the system.
Okay.
I'm just inviting my co-facilitator for some guidance. We've got 3 minutes left. Do we sum this up? Do we talk more? What do you think?
What I wanted to, I'm just wondering if there is any burning challenge, maybe that we can cover in the next 2.5 minutes before we close. So challenges as a leader that you're facing now, because we went through what we had planned and we haven't really given you an opportunity to say, hey, I'm wanting I'm wanting some share or information about this. So I would like to create that space. I'm not sure if Uvasi was wanting to speak.
I'm relaxed. Thank you, Refila.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Anybody?
Okay, it seems like there's no question in that instance. So yeah, I guess we can lead ourselves into closing, and I'm hoping that you got some level of insights in terms of what could be different and what's on offer. Particularly, yeah, the topic of leadership, at least even for me, in my view, it's particularly challenging, and it requires that whole thing of ownership. And in my own personal reflection, and even just looking into the country, when we had Jay-Z, it was easy to point fingers. And we still pointing fingers with CR, you know, to say you ought to be doing this. And the personal experience on my side, I had an opportunity to serve as chair in one of the NPO, it's an NPO. And it was for an interim period. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's so much harder to be in a leading position than to call out the shots to be, you ought to be doing this, you ought to be doing this. So this, for me, it was that realization of really taking, stepping up in my own self. And before I speak, have an assessment on myself to say, are you really doing what you're demanding of the other person to do? So, yeah. But then that's me. But then hopefully with ORSC as well, it's assisting me to bring that awareness to me with the interactions that I have.
So it's Gary here. I'm going to jump in because I actually have another call at now. Mish, it was nice to see you smiling, and I'm glad I joined the call. I don't see you smiling a lot on an NWTA, so it was really nice to see you smiling here. Maybe you need to take some of that into your hobby. Anyway, I'm out. I'll chat to you later.
Gary. Thank you so much. Just one thing we want to say to you all is that there is this course that is happening in November. It's 2 days. It covers both leadership and coaching. So whether you're a leader or whether you're somebody who supports leaders, it really addresses some of the questions we've been discussing tonight and lots more. All the details are on the website that's on your screen, orsc.co.za. And there's a gazillion examples in kind of plain language, not coachy language, of how people are using this all over Africa and the Southern Hemisphere at orscafrica.net. And fundamentally, to me, just to sum up from my side, there's something about leadership being both giving direction and guidance to whoever you're leading, and holding space for everybody else in that team or organization to be themselves leaders and lead themselves and contribute to the direction. That takes a lot of skill, and it doesn't come naturally. You need to practice, you need to get the skills. ORSC is a fabulous way of doing it. That was my little plug. I would love to invite a one word or one phrase checkout from anybody who's still, who has the time, just to say one thing you take away from the last hour.
I want to wish Anastasia the best of luck with her new position.
Thank you so much, Henny.
There you go.
Thanks so much.
I'm feeling refreshed.
Paul, yeah, I'm feeling like the lightning rod analogy that Mish used was very useful to just think about how things work and relationships work.
Mine is not easy, but necessary. The shift.
I agree with that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, for me, it's being challenged and to stick it out. And it requires effort and intentionality.
And for me, Mish, just first of all, huge gratitude to my co-lead, Refilwe, and to everybody who's participated tonight, and all those others, the other 20 or so who registered, and some of whom wrote to us saying, please, can you record, who are not with us in body, but I'm sure with us in spirit. And just, I guess what I'm taking away is the importance of this. Like, these are our lives. This is our future. And whatever we can do to lead better ourselves and to help the leaders that we're engaged with, because I know there's several of those, I mean, leaders of leaders on this planet, whatever we can do to help leadership improve is going to literally change the world. So the big shift, folks, thank you for contributing. Would love to see you again. We've got some more webinars lined up, and like we mentioned, there's the course in November, for which there's still a massive discount if you sign up and pay before the 24th of September. Thank you.
Thanks, Mish.
Good night.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.